Hello and welcome everyone to our next MTI Live of this program season. So super excited to be talking today all about fundraising. So as many of you know, this is really a hot topic. It's a difficult fundraising climate. And so really excited to have four really experienced investors here today to share their experiences, tips and tricks on how to manage fundraising from your pitch deck to actually doing diligence with the investors on you and finally communicating with them, updating them on your milestones and everything in between. And so we called this from seed to scale. So talking about all about growing a company. And as you guys know, growing a startup across these well-planned fundraising rounds really requires a green thumb to get the green. So whether or not you guys are already ripe with this financial acumen, these impactful investors and fundraising experts are going to provide some insights here today on how they evaluate medtech startups specifically, but I'm sure this information will be valuable no matter what sector you're in. And if you guys are joining from LinkedIn, welcome and thank you so much for joining us live here today. As you are listening, if you guys have questions, so on our MTI cohort side, you guys can drop those in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom, and we'll tackle those at the end separately. For those on LinkedIn, you can put your questions in to the event comments, and then our amazing Gabby on our marketing team is going to get those to me on the side, and we'll try to tackle those at the end of the webinar. So really excited to talk all about these best practices to nurture your pitches for different types of investors, pruning your dilution, cultivating bridge rounds without overwatering, and helping your cap table grow strong to a successful exit. So without further ado, I want to introduce our incredible four panelists that we have here today, spanning really diverse backgrounds in the investment landscape. So we'll start off here with Justin Klein, who's a managing partner of Vensana Capital. Justin, would love to hear a few minutes of your background.
Thanks, Nicole. And thanks to you and the MTI team for hosting us. It's a great organization. Love participating in these events and look forward to questions from the participants too. So I'm Justin Klein. I'm a co-founder and managing partner of Vensana Capital. We're a medtech focused venture capital fund. I'm based in the DC area. My co-founding partner, Kirk Nielsen, is in Minneapolis. And in addition to the two of us, we have 14 other team members spread across a couple different time zones. We have been investing. Our first fund was raised in early 2019. I think we've invested in about 24 companies and recently raised a third fund we announced earlier this year. So capital under management's approaching $1 billion. We consider ourselves stage agnostic. We have experience investing at all phases of product development and commercialization. And for us, medical technology, which sometimes is worth defining because everybody talks about it a little differently, but it's medical devices, diagnostics and life sciences tools, and digital solutions, particularly those that impact the clinical and commercial channels we know well from kind of our core background in the medical device space. So looking forward to participating with a great group. Thanks.
Thanks, Justin. Super excited to have you here today. I know you'll provide some great insight. As you know, we have companies in MTI across all stages of development, pre-seed to growth, post-market. Even have a company this year that's raised 250 million. So really wide range that I think will benefit from your wisdom. Awesome. Up next, we've got Lisa Swinnon from AHA Ventures. So American Heart Association is a wonderful partner of ours here at MedTech Innovator. And so really fortunate to have Lisa and her wealth of expertise she's bringing today.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here. Thanks, Nicole. Let's see. I am leading AHA Ventures. It is the Heart Association's venture program, which has four different funds. Across them, we focus, on everything related to heart and brain health and related conditions that contribute to heart and brain health. So in our women's health focused fund, could be autoimmune disorders, it could be gynecological disorders, could be other disorders, metabolic, that affect heart and brain health, thinking about women first, but not exclusively. And Cardiation was medical device fund that focuses broadly across the spectrum. We have a social determinants of health fund as well, which focuses on more of those social determinant issues that address or inform your ability to have good heart and brain health. And then lastly, we have a venture studio, which is interested in collaborating with entrepreneurs to build new companies in this space. and I've been on the venture side for, I don't know, like 25 years or something, and an entrepreneur as well, and hanging around healthcare for a long time across all of the sectors.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Lisa has a very impressive background. Make sure you look into her bio if you haven't yet. She even has a blog she runs. Maybe we can hear about that later, about the investment space. So super excited to have you, and very important issues between social determinants and also diseases disproportionately affecting women. I know that this is, really important in this day and age. So glad to have you guys tackling that. Up next, we've got Albert Baker, who's the Corporate Director of Innovation and Commercialization at Hackensack Meridian Health.
Hi there, and again, I'm going to echo thank you for having us and allowing us, inviting us to participate in this. I love talking to startups. So Hackensack Meridian Health is the largest integrated hospital system in New Jersey. We have 18 hospitals, and what kind of sets us aside is that we also have a school of medicine, and we have a research, big R research, called the Center for Discovery and Innovation, where we do research in things like infectious disease, CAR T, and others. So cancers is another big one, but all of that is kind of integrated into the system. So that research is actually translational. So their goal as researchers is to get it from the bench to the patient as fast as possible. And we also have an investment fund, small investment fund, and we are purely strategic investors. So when we talk to startups, we certainly get, like any other strategic investor, we get buy-in, clinical buy-in, and validation. And then our goal is to follow and from an investment point of view, and to and sometimes early stage seed to probably Series A. But again, our goal is to take that solution, and we anticipate to use that solution in the short to medium term. And personally, my background, I've been in healthcare for about 15 years directly. I've done some startups, and also obviously part of a larger health system. But also I've been outside of healthcare for my other years that I won't go into. But I've done what was kind of then called emerging technologies, Wi-Fi, IoT, Internet of Things, and some other technologies. But I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you so much, Albert. And we're super excited to have you as well. So our MedTech Innovator cohort just finished up their value workshops where they were thinking about, importantly, the hospital and provider perspective as part of this and what value they're offering them. So I'm sure you will have some words of wisdom on what types of evidence it takes, not just for the buying stage, but for investment in a by a healthcare system like you guys. So your strategic insight is going to be really valuable for that. And now last but certainly not least, we've got Susan Stimson, who is the Managing Director at KCK Group. Welcome, Susan.
Well, thanks, Nicole, and thanks for MedTech Innovator for putting on these what I hope to be valuable resources for your community. So I'm a managing director at KCK MedTech, and we're a venture and growth equity firm. A couple of things that are some of our uniqueness is, one, we're an evergreen fund. So we like to invest in companies and with the mindset that we're going to continue invest and think long term about the organization. And we feel that aligns us with the entrepreneurs and the companies and the employees and other shareholders to build value in the business over time. In addition, we are a team of operators. Our MedTech team is based in Campbell, California. There are 6 of us. We all come from operating backgrounds. Myself, I'm 30 years in medical devices, but we've got a combination of startup, Fortune 500 companies, starting companies, leading companies, and getting our hands involved in every aspect of the medical device business. So we like to lean in and add that value to our companies as they scale. We invest in therapeutic medical devices, so pretty narrow focus. We tend to be a little later stage, so pivotal study through initial commercialization and beyond. Our check sizes are usually 10 million and up. And we like to invest in companies that can grow and become a standalone business. You know, part of investing over the long term is thinking about the potential for that business to grow and be a standalone company. Not that, an exit wouldn't be valued or appreciated along the way, but instead of building maybe as a product that's designed to fit in a larger company's bag, we like to invest in companies that can stand on their own.
Thanks, Susan, and really love, first of all, the focus in medtech. I know therapeutics specifically, but really need more investors that are keen on medtech specifically in this space, and not just life science at large. So love that, and also Susan had mentioned in our prep call that a lot of folks come from operational backgrounds. Almost everyone, I think, at KCK Medtech. So really, she has been where you guys all are. So I think that insight's going to be particularly valuable in knowing how to hurdle these from that perspective as well. So awesome. So moving into our questions, we're going to first talk about fundraising strategies a bit. So how to structure your rounds, timing, and how to think about dilution in a creative way. Is it always such a bad thing? How should you work this toward? What are those inflection points? And make sure that the folks at your cap table are worth it. So we just had in MedTech Innovator our term sheet webinar last week, so went into some detail on this. So will be great to hear more from you guys. Then we'll talk about how to manage these investor expectations. So once you have investors at the table, how do you make sure your communication cadence is appropriate? And then moving into due diligence as well, as these investors are, looking into the details of what you guys are working on in your progress. And then finally, alternative capital sources and strategies. So we know it's a super tough fundraising environment right now. So could there be, other avenues to look toward as you're sort of bridging this gap to hopefully greener fields in the future? So starting off, with fundraising strategies, we get a lot of companies in the cohort, wondering, how much is really the best to raise in an initial round? Should you be really trying to raise enough to hit these early critical milestones, or should you be raising a larger fund for, multiple years of growth down the road? So Lisa, we'll start off with you. How would you suggest that startups think about structuring the amount that they're raising?
Well, I mean, this question is somewhat time limited specific. I think in the current market, and really for some time, medtech has been, somewhat out of favor, medical devices anyway. And the demand of, what milestone to reach before you've reached an actual legit inflection point, according to investors, has really changed. So while it's always nice to, raise smaller amounts at the beginning when you can afford to do that, if the next round's going to be really tight because you're still not going to your pivotal, you should think about, how to get as far as you can. I think it's really important long before you actually fundraise to start talking to investors about what they think the milestones are, not what you think the milestones are, and to think about your raise accordingly. I'm not sure there's a hard and fast answer to the question in terms of dollars or or time, but enough to get to the milestones that the target investors believe are real, whether you like them or not. That's what you need, and not to get too hung up on dilution and things like that too early in this game, because you've got to get there. You've got to get to the promised land, and if you don't, the dilution won't matter.
Yeah. Great answer, and love, having back and forth with the investors. It's really great advice. Justin, you've seen companies that have gone back and forth through many different stages, and maybe you've had to restructure milestones as well. So what are your thoughts on this?
I agree with a lot of the advice that Lisa shared. And I think to me, the foundation for figuring out this question for each company is really understanding what it takes to validate your product as a commercial opportunity. And there are requirements for medtech innovations, to become a business, right? And you could work backwards. This is what we do when we invest. We work backwards from saying, okay, if we want to be in the US market, able to sell this product to the patients that need it, the clinicians that want to use it, et cetera, what do we need? And a lot of the highlights for understanding how to target the patients, right? And sometimes in new markets, companies have to demonstrate that. You have to raise money commercially to do it. In some indications, that's very well known, right? So if you back up, you got to make sure that you can at least code and have coverage policies and get paid for innovation. Sometimes that stuff exists, which is great. Back up a little further, FDA approval, right? With the right label and indication for use. And to get that, usually some kind of clinical data that sways FDA plus all the other stakeholders. And so you can kind of work your way backwards to whatever point this technology is that you're working on. And you got to think about the entire path forward to get to market. I think one of the things that most of us have gotten wrong when we've been wrong in medtech, whether it's investors or entrepreneurs, is underestimating the time and money it takes to do all the things you have to do to become a bona fide commercial opportunity. And that's whether you want to be a public company or this should be an accretive acquisition for a strategic. You've got to know what it takes to get there. When you know that, you can really estimate the dollar amounts and think about how might you break it up and how could you stage financing so that, there's room for some step ups and things like that. And you maintain good alignment between your management team and your investors with each other over time. But the core of it is understanding what it takes. And then you can kind of back into some reasonable assumptions around dollars and milestones and things like that. So that's honestly how we approach pretty much every deal that we look at.
Can I also
Yeah.
add just in that, take a look at comps, similar companies and what it took them. You're not the first company to come through the gate. So look at what other companies have done, how much they've raised, how long it took them, what their revenue ramps are. If no company in the history of your market has ever sold for 250 million or more, then your odds of doing so are also slim. You might, but don't count on it. And so just be thinking about it really thoughtfully.
Yeah, great advice, both of you. And to Lisa's point, so we have pitch book access rotational for our cohort companies. So if you guys listening have not signed up for rotation yet, this is a great way to find that out. So you can look at comparable companies to you and all of the rounds they've raised to date, who their investors were, and start, thinking about structuring it in that way. And, Justin, a really good point, starting with what does it take to validate your product? What are all of the tests you need to do, the evidence that you need to generate ultimately to bring this to market and also to get adoption. Regulatory is really just the first hurdle. Getting payment and broadening your user base is really the next challenge after that. So what do the patients look for? What do the providers look for? And so Albert, would love to hear from you on this. What strategies do you think these companies should be taking in their initial rounds and in thinking about size?
Yeah, and I'd like to kind of build on what Lisa said. Especially on the early stage, I think it's really important to have that core team, and not just the core team of employees, but also advisors to help one understand the regulatory. I mean, speaking from a provider point of view, certainly understanding the workflow and how the product fits into the workflow, and then also how you're going to, because I think in understanding those key aspects, it also helps you to develop those milestones as well. And those milestones, I agree 100%. If you can talk to investors early on, that will help you to figure out what milestones are the most important, because you're not going to boil the ocean. You're going to solve some specific problems. What are those problems, and how do you get there in order to get to the next stage? Because it's always about getting to the next stage.
Great. Thanks, Albert. Yeah. And speaking of getting to the next stage, so once these companies, have their seed or pre-seed, and maybe are considering later bridge rounds, Justin, would love to hear from you. How do institutional investors view these later bridge rounds versus the initial fundraising? And is there a setup that you can put together that can work to not deter these later investors?
Well, I think I guess two pieces of advice. I mean, when we're thinking about leading a new round and there's prior capital, and maybe it's in the form of seed or angel funding or at later stages, bridge funding, convertible notes work well. And I think, giving investors in those notes clean terms with an appropriate discount for the risk they're taking ahead of the bigger financing works really well. I think where companies can get into trouble, maybe particularly the early stages, is ascribing a valuation to a small amount of dollars really early, and then institutional investors may come in and say, we can't really align where we want to finance the business with where the existing investors have their money, and that puts the entrepreneur in a really difficult position. We could solve that, but if you just have notes that are converting at a discount, it's a much easier discussion. And then I think in some cases, companies maybe raise a Series B or C or D round. There's money paid in, there's a valuation. They need to raise more. I think it's sometimes a hard call whether you want to extend that round of financing and kind of push your post money up and expect that you will grow into that and finance off of it flat or up, or maybe you want to have some more flexibility with convertible notes for that bridging capital. And in general, I think investors will try to respect prior rounds of preferred where they can. But if you're a kind of a tweener, sometimes the convertible notes do make it a little bit easier to figure out how to get everybody aligned.
No, it's great advice. Yeah. In our term sheet webinar last week, we were talking about differences between convertible notes and safes and, how investors may favor convertible notes for that reason. So, and great to hear that from your perspective as well. So, we talked about generating evidence for your product, but, sometimes our companies are really platform solutions that could have multiple products and multiple different types of evidence they could generate down the road for this. So, Susan, would love to hear from you for these platform products. How should these founders really model these investor perceptions when trying to weigh between an initial focus for a first product versus multiple opportunities that they might pursue in parallel down the line? And how does that affect valuation as well?
Yeah, platform products are incredibly attractive to investors, and it's a great thing to find as an entrepreneur, right? Just that potential to continue to drive long-term growth is really, impactful and can make a difference over time. I'd say that said, presenting the potential of that platform in a strategic manner is critical. It's important, investors have to believe in your ability to prioritize and your ability to execute. And I'll say like a couple things, and I'll give an example of maybe how to do it is, we've certainly walked away from pitches where the presentation starts with, we have this platform or we've got this tool and it can do A, B, C, and D, and here's all the TAMs, and it doesn't really start out with the killer app. Or maybe it starts out with the clinical need, the killer app, but then when it gets to use of funds or strategy, it includes, 3 to 5 of either the indications or different clinical applications. And that also just feels to us, or it's we're doing this, or, oh, we could do this and we could do this. And that just says you haven't figured it out. And if you haven't figured it out, we've got a hard time investing unless we're going to have a really heavy hand and help you get in there and strategize, which could be an option as well. So then how do you do it? And I can give an example actually from my Intersecting ENT days. Intersecting ENT we developed the first bioabsorbable drug-eluting stents for sinusitis. And, it's easy to see hey, we're starting here. We can take, we can expand to different indications. We can put different drugs on it for also sinusitis indications. we can take a steroid-eluting bioabsorbable stent and we can pop it elsewhere in the body. And so we talked, and I think it's important to spend time talking, as a team, and then talking with the board of the directions you can go. But then and maybe some of them you might want to write IP on if it makes sense. So I think it's important to have those conversations. But then when presenting to investors, we really focused on that killer app. Every, all the use of capital was oriented towards that, that start. And at the end, we'd say, hey, by the way, this has, and these are in different investor pitches, including all the way through our Series C. And I think even when we went public, we at the end, you talk about all the levers you can pull, but also that, hey, this is in time. This is when we're going to think about these things. But it's more, it says to the investors that, yes, I'm thinking about these. I recognize the need to consider and prioritize and think about the, expanded potential of what we're doing. But I also have a really diligent plan that I'm sharing with you. So anyway, I'd say that's the way to do it, is really focus everything on that killer app, and but ensure that you're also communicating that you've thought through expansion and you've made the conscious decision to prioritize things in this manner.
Yeah, great advice, and especially love the example of the drug-eluting implant, because we have so many biomaterials companies in our cohort where, they can address all these different indications and potentially include drugs as well as part of their product. And so, how do you think about structuring future products and really focusing, honing in your initial value prop on that first one to market? So great. So when we're thinking about investments, half of you guys are at like strategic investors right now, where there's a larger organization that you're kind of a part of, and really, the goals of what you're looking for in terms of investment feeds into that. So start off with you, Lisa, but, how should companies structure these strategic investments alongside traditional VC to preserve this alignment, control, and long-term exit flexibility?
Well, honestly, I don't think good strategic investors invest any differently than any other investors in terms of terms. I mean, there shouldn't be weird lockup clauses or requirements for first rights of things by and large, because it limits your ability to grow and exit oftentimes. So we aren't fans of that strategy, and I don't think most of the more experienced strategics are anymore. It's kind of a older school way of doing things. Nevertheless, you still sometimes see it, and I would be very leery of it. I think if people have rights to acquire and they don't activate them, it makes you look like damaged goods, whether you like it or not, and whether you deserve it or not. And if you give people rights of first offer, first refusal, it often scares off potential other acquirers and investors along the way. So really, I think strategics should either be just like everybody else, or better, bring you extra value in terms of helping you grow your business in addition to capital. Like, we like to bring other assets from AHA to the party when we invest, when we can, access to different programs or capabilities that we have, access to our pretty extensive membership of clinicians and other folks in the field, access to data. But we don't expect anybody to give us special rights as an investor, just good attention.
Great. Albert, what are your thoughts from the healthcare system investor perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Lisa, because it's interesting, even in our internal discussions, as a healthcare system, there's that school of thought of wanting special conditions as a strategic. I actually am on the other side, that we should be more like a normal investor, and also think that, we want our focus should be on getting the value of the solution to our patients as fast as possible, which goes to some of the other comments about focus and having a solution that actually can add value. And then also making sure that we can add value to the company as well, because at the end of the day, we want the company to grow, and not just from a return point of view, but we want other solutions and more advanced solutions that come from that company. And we want to make it as easy as possible for that company to grow, and not have obstacles as well.
It's good to hear. Thank you guys. And so Susan and Justin also would like to hear from you guys about this, but also in terms of, CVCs, so corporate venture capital. So a lot of our cohort companies will end up getting investment from, some of the large players in the space that have their own venture arms. So like Olympus, Dexcom, J&J. So how do you guys view investments like this from corporate strategics? And is there anything these companies can do to make sure they're not, pigeonholing themselves for later M&A by a specific player, leaving the door open for future acquisition down the road? Maybe Justin, we'll start with you on that one.
Sure. Well, I think honestly, in the medtech space, our sort of corporate venture peers have been great partners. There's been a scarcity of capital really relative to the demand for, more than 10, 15 years. And having them as part of our syndicates has always been, a really positive experience. We've invested many different ways with corporates. I would agree with the overall comments that, clean terms and sort of positioning one's company or corporate investment like another investor is really good, especially if they can maintain a long-term perspective on how to continually support the company over time. We recognize that strategic priorities can change within corporates, leadership can change, and sometimes, these investments may lose kind of a champion internally. But ideally, a corporate venture group is committed to supporting companies, for the long term. And that said, I think we have done deals where we've given rights to strategics. There are certain opportunities that we believe deserve funding in our ecosystem where we may not end up with 6 buyers competing for that asset at the end of the day. There really may be 2. And if we can identify that early on, we may partner with one or both and say, look, we're going to create an opportunity to advance this technology, have it be available, for your portfolio to the extent, they're going to take meaningful risk with us. And sometimes, we do get more attractive or less dilutive capital, as a result, but they may then get the certainty that they have an ownership opportunity for that. And so it's part of them kind of supplementing their R&D budgets with external innovation. And so those can work well, frankly, for all parties. You do want to make sure you understand their interests, and you want to do things like raise enough capital that you have more runway than, their decision point. Sometimes companies sort of couple up a little early, and then the strategic interest changes and they run out of money and they don't have an ability to finance and keep going. So you really got to think through the unintended consequences of doing it. So yeah, it needs to be done carefully and thoughtfully, but I think it's an important part of how our ecosystem, is going to advance innovation and to patients and otherwise. So
Honestly, if it wasn't for the strategics, the medtech industry probably would have died 10 years ago. I mean, they put in most of the money when a lot of the VCs ran for the hills, and so thankfully the traditional strategics, H is a little bit of a different animal, are there. And it's just, as with all investors, it's a long-term relationship, and it has to like any relationship, make sense for all parties. And you have to be able to survive if it doesn't continue in a material way. So it's important to keep an open mind, but not do too many gymnastics to suit them.
Yeah, if I can add to that, because in working with some of our companies that we've actually invested in, and there was one in particular that had a strong strategic partner, and they were very early stage as a company, and that's where I certainly had concerns at the time where the company aligns itself to the strategic, and the focus of the company actually changes, and you do have to be mindful of things changing with that strategic partner. And and now also, the strategic partner certainly has their goals, and you need to make sure, yes, there's some alignment, but yeah, as a company, you also have goals that you shouldn't lose sight of as well.
Great to hear the optimism around that. And especially, can be very helpful to have these folks at the table when crafting your future milestones and, building your team and ultimately bringing the product to market. So great to hear that. Susan, would love to hear from any.
Can I just add one
Yes.
more thing? And I'm sorry but on the flip side of that, I have a company that we're working with, the platform company, and they've are now a little bit more advanced from a market point of view, but now they have a very strong strategic partner, and I quite honestly, with less experience management and actually a less experienced board, I would think that a mistake that's very easy to make is, we have this partner, this is our exit, and that's what we should be focused on. Whereas suppose that in this case, this is an important partner. Yes, we certainly need funds from that partner to internally fund all of the development aspects, so we can fulfill the needs of that strategic. But also we need to look at other opportunities to de-risk. And it's the de-risking part that you should never lose sight of, in my view.
Yeah, great advice. Keep thinking broadly, and even for these strategics, maybe not necessarily just for M&A, but for other parallel collaboration opportunities. Other products of theirs that can work well with yours that you can partner with down the road on as well. So it's a great way to structure it. And so Susan, I'd love to hear if you have more thoughts on this, but also how you see the best approach for raising increasingly large rounds while keeping M&A optionality. So have you learned any lessons from past deals around this?
Yeah, I think as has been a theme here, raising, I think Justin phrased it earlier, you keep the end in mind, and raising to meet the most value driving milestones, right? So that's, I think the most important thing. I'll give kind of two examples that I think can help through this. One is, we've got a company called Revamp Medical, and it is a product that addresses patients with acute decompensated heart failure. And in cardiology, and you'll hear this a lot sometimes, acquisitions can happen earlier. They are in their early feasibility stage, and we invested amidst that stage, and again, we're thinking long term. We're thinking, hey, we want to build value. We want to make sure through this fundraising round that they are well set up to go into their pivotal study. You're never fully de-risk a pivotal until you run the pivotal. But what are the key things that you want to de-risk going into that pivotal study? And what we see in many companies that are raising, and they give us our plan, and sometimes driven by some of their earlier investors who are angling for an earlier exit, is, hey, let's run, this early feasibility study, just do a single arm, do the bare minimum possible, and then raise for the pivotal, and that time try to get acquired. Well, the challenge of that is you could do that and maybe it works, and it's not that it hasn't happened, but you also could get to the point where you're raising for your pivotal and you haven't appropriately de-risked your pivotal. And so what we did with Revamp is we actually put in some extra money so they could expand that EFS from a single arm to a randomized EFS. We were able to work with FDA, get a protocol amendment to keep the study rolling. And we believe that by the end of that study, they're going to be well set up to proceed into that pivotal. Will they get acquired? I don't know. Probably, I still feel like it's early for us. We're just thinking, hey, we're in a great position. And for us, we've de-risked the pivotal. We're going to want to, we're going to want to keep investing in that company. And by the way, anyone buying that company is going to want to de-risk the pivotal. So maybe it happens, but your value is going to factor in that risk, right? So again, I think, but sometimes companies get pressured of, hey, just put in the minimum amount, try to get so and so to buy you. And I think that that's where the people can make a lot of mistakes and get there. And then, now you're needing to raise a smaller round to maybe do a pilot or something like that, or you run a failed pivotal. Another example, I'd say on the commercial side, kind of back to Intersect E&T days, is we had a lot of discussion once you're in the commercial stage, how large do you build your sales force? Because if you think there's a buyer that already has a sales force, are they really going to value your sales force, right? And they're when they put in an offer to acquire, if that happens. So I think what, in that situation, what we did is, you know, build it with the mindset of what do we need to prove to raise the next round. And that's going to be attractive, whether it's to another investor or to acquire. And, when it came time to scale the business, um, we collected, data in a very, methodical fashion that supported scaling that business. And maybe that also supports an acquisition, but at some point in time, you just have to keep rolling and you have to build a business that can stand on its own. So I'd just say yes, for commercial, you don't want to strive for, revenue growth at all costs. You want to be methodical about it. But along the way, it's, hey, with this round, what is the story we're going to be able to tell? And that should be equally attractive to, raising your next round or to a potential acquirer.
Well, thanks, Susan. Super helpful. I really like the idea of having a story around each round, and what's this leading to ultimately at the end of the day. So, last question I want to ask you guys around fundraising strategies and timing, and maybe I'll target this to you first, Albert. But it's a very challenging climate right now, and obviously startups are maybe having a weaker position at the negotiation table. But how can these early stage startups possibly minimize dilution while still securing enough capital to reach key milestones, especially in these challenging times?
Don't waste time and money.
Yep. Don't waste time and money. I do think that, I mean, it does depend on where the company is from a stage point of view, but one of the key things in startups is every second you're burning cash, and the pot's only so large, and unless you have a huge amount of revenue, or at least enough revenue to come in and keep filling that pot, in most cases you don't. So you need to be mindful of those strategic choices that you need to make. Again, looking at those milestones, because those milestones should equate to the value of your company, especially from a investment point of view, and making sure that, again, that you have those the right team and advisors to kind of help you make those choices, and adjust those choices as you may need to. But those decisions, one of the exciting things about every startup, no matter the market, is that you need to make lots of decisions, and most of those decisions are actually quite important. And then and those decisions include partnerships. So strategics like us choosing the right partner that can add value to you. And then again, as we spoke on the strategic side, the right strategic partner, again, that can add value to you, realistic value to you, and help to de-risk the solution. And I want to also go back to, from a platform point of view, that one of the things that the double-edged swords of platforms is, as we spoke earlier, is on it forces you to choose, but don't also forget on the IP side, it does enable you to perhaps create the kind of a moat, a really good moat for on the IP side as well, which also adds to the value and a little bit of de-risking.
Yeah, great advice, Albert. Lisa, you want to add on to this too?
I think be careful on your valuations early. A lot of times early stage companies raise money from angels or individuals who add a lot of value potentially, but are maybe less valuation sensitive. And you should always be valuation sensitive, even if your investors are not, because what you really don't want is a down round, even when the company's doing well. And so just, I think too many entrepreneurs look at valuation as a sign of success. It's a win. Yay, high valuation. It's not necessarily a win. It can be a real lose. And, stay in the range that's normal for what you do. And don't, unless you're a truly exceptional by some standard that is not your own, just don't get too far ahead of yourself on those numbers because it can really bite you in the end.
Yeah, great advice. And before we move into the next sets of questions, I just want to remind you guys, so for cohort, if you guys have questions for the panelists, please drop those in the Q&A box. It's the button at the bottom of your window. So looks like we got 4 already. And those listening on LinkedIn, please submit your questions. You can just put them in the event comments. So Gabby from our team will get those off to me. So want to make sure to tackle what you guys are interested in hearing as well. So, talking about investor expectations. I'm curious, Justin, from your perspective, how should these companies be constructing their milestones in a way that's realistic yet compelling to keep your attention? And how would you go about presenting these on a single slide, multiple slides, back up? What's the best format?
Well, I think as I sort of alluded to, in one of the early topics we touched on, kind of about knowing your path. I think entrepreneurs really want to communicate the depth of their understanding of their market and the sort of product opportunity they're going after, and all of the different stakeholder needs, along the path to getting the product to patients. From there, I think you can kind of break down what I'll call financeable milestones into chunks that probably relate to, V&V validation of your product, clinical evidence generation and regulatory approval, and then, commercial proof points if needed. And I would say in general, investors like to fund things for 18 to 24 months at a time. Just kind of a rule of thumb, when you fund for less time, the entrepreneurs are back out on the road sooner, raising capital. We know how hard that is and how, time consuming it is. It's not a great way to sort of allow them to focus and keep heads down on operations. And when you get kind of beyond 24 to 36 months or 24 to 30 months even, you're kind of really guessing, at the back end of that time period, how much money and time it's going to take and, what the focus is going to be, where the money's going to be spent. So I think that 18 to 24 months is a pretty good window. And so I think if you kind of overlay those two concepts, you really want to drill down into your use of proceeds, for the round of funding and the milestones you can achieve. You want to size that round accordingly. It's worth noting you can spend more and do more in the same period of time, but you got to make sure you can convince people you have the people that can execute on it. And beyond that, I think it's really important to have pretty granular details on what you think does come next in the next round of funding and those milestones ahead, because everybody's going to get in this boat together at this financing, and you're going to progress to a point where you do have to raise again, typically, or you're telling an exit story. And really understanding the next round of capital and the timeline and the milestones allows everybody to agree on things like valuation and expectations for the future. So it's kind of those two pieces, like use of proceeds for this round and some clarity and confidence, that you can substantiate on what's after that.
Awesome. Super helpful. Albert, anything else you want to add to this as well?
I would also, and we talked about it offline. I always look at companies and ask about, how AI is helping them to be more efficient from a development point of view, or at least adding value from a clinical point of view. And companies that do not use any AI from again, on a development or otherwise, then I wonder, I have some questions about how thoughtful they are. And then also on the other side, there are opportunities. I know Singapore used to have a lot of programs for especially device companies to do some testing, early testing. I would look outside of the US, especially in these times, for opportunities as well.
Yeah, great advice, and love the emphasis on AI. I mean, it's increasingly taking over our world, so utilizing it in the best way you can is important, and glad to hear that investors do value this. It's funny, I was actually talking to one of our cohort companies earlier today that's working on a biomaterial solution, and they said that they have AI program to help them optimize the chemistry of this material in different scenarios. And they don't mention this often to investors because they don't, want to distract them, but sounds like this is something that they want to hear. So that's really great to hear, Albert. Awesome. So, how about when these commercialization timelines might slip from you guys? How do you keep these investors engaged and excited if, things have to get delayed a little bit? So, Lisa, I'd love to hear from you on this one.
I mean, look, we are realistic. We know the odds of the date slipping are probably more than 100% all of the time. It's really about being transparent and communicating well with your board and your investors and not ever, causing undue surprise. I mean, sometimes you get surprised, and just communicate it when you do. If it's because the FDA is going slow or, this or that, or, that is outside of your control, it's very understandable. If it's because you're not managing your clinical trial sites well, or you're finding problems with the work you're doing, you need to take a hard look at why and come not just with telling us the problem, but what your solution's going to be. But again, we're here for the long haul. These relationships are long, and we just want you to be honest with us and help us help you and help us understand what you're doing about it. It's when we don't know and we don't hear along the way and we don't understand how you're fixing it, and all of a sudden we have a crisis, that's when it gets not, when the alignment gets out of whack.
That's great. So stay honest and close communication, and your investors are there to help you. I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
Susan, would love to hear from you on this too, and like how do you go about communicating realistic timelines as well?
Yeah, I think, and you mentioned commercialization specifically. I think, in many things, data makes all the difference, and I think especially in commercialization, I think I mean, a lot of times when we get involved, or even just hear initial pitches, it's surprising to see, but it's very common to see, a lack of data around building a revenue model, or lack of analytics once you are commercial and are, tracking in order to forecast and plan better. So I think for one, if your revenue outlook isn't going to meet expectations, just show it, get the shock over, and then immediately dive into the whys. Why why are you missing expectations, like Lisa said? And then, we want to see, a maniacal focus on the data, hey, or we think, the sales cycle, is longer than it takes. Well, have you measured it? What is it? Right? Like, there should be a base case assumption, and then it should be measured, right? Account profile. Did you start with one account profile? What was it? Did it not play out and you need to switch? Why? And so I think we can, like Lisa said, like, especially with commercialization, like, it changes all the time. And, the overall goal is to get to predictability, right? Predictability is key in raising a scaling round, going public, etc. And so, getting into the rationale, the assumptions, why did this happen? There's still going to be surprises, but we want to see that you're not only coming in thinking that through well, but that you're measuring things. So when, are there leading indicators that you're watching? Or maybe you thought and then missed. Okay, just tell us what happened. And especially, if you've got folks on your board that have lived through various commercialization cycles, we've probably seen a lot, and we're happy to jump in and brainstorm with you on maybe what would work. Maybe there's an example from another company. Maybe there's an individual from another company that we can connect you with. But like anything, put the data behind it and measure it and have really good analytics.
Susan.
And don't leave commercialization planning till after your product has gone through its clinical cycles. I mean, I don't know how many companies I've seen that have never spoken to a payer and trying to understand what it would take for them to pay. What's the ROI they have to demonstrate? If you build it, they will not necessarily come. So you really need to plan for that.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely. I mean, that is
Albert,
really...
yeah, I'd love to hear from you on this, and also on the diligence side too. What
Yeah.
types of data and evidence should if these companies be showing in their data rooms for investors?
I mean, certainly on the health economic side, I think that is so important. From a provider point of view, we need to understand not only how we can serve our patients and outcomes, so that data is extremely important, but also how do we make money is on the same level. So that needs to be part of the story from the beginning, quite honestly. And what you don't know, but that's part of the partnership. Maybe we can help to teach you. And then on the what was the other question that you
Yeah, just about the data room in general,
Yeah,
like
the
what
data
evidence you
room.
like to see in this. Yeah.
We and if you heard me in my calls with companies, we love data. So we our clinicians love data. Our managers love numbers, and so we want to see any clinical data that you have, and we would be looking at that data, and then also looking at from a health economics point of view, any data there as well. What are your assumptions? That sort of thing. So yes, I would like to see the data of the health economics, certainly the clinical data, and then also on the roadmap side, just kind of understanding the development plan. And one of the things that I always ask is, all right, you see the development plan, you see the timelines, and the question I ask myself, and that the team asks, is their team strong enough that if there's an issue with the development plan, can they fix it? And do they have the talent in order to address those issues? Because something will always go wrong.
Yeah, great. And so speaking of, doing this diligence, would love to hear from Susan, maybe you first, and then Justin, like what are some red flags that commonly surface during this diligence process? So they've submitted all their data, but what might cause you to take a second look?
Yeah, I think one thing we look for, whether it's the initial pitch or through the diligence process, is just transparency. And that's, and also uh, a collaborative nature. And so that means, hey, they're presenting their strategy, and if you challenge it, is there a defensiveness? Is there a pulling away, or is there a leaning in? And maybe what you're challenging with, they've had good rationale and decided against it. But are they, how do they handle that? Because again, I think Lisa mentioned earlier, this is a long-term relationship, and you need to be able to know that you can have these debates, healthy debates, And so, even on an initial call, you'd be surprised how, just throw in a couple questions about strategy and you can immediately read a reaction of whether that team, generally either, maybe it's just the CEO or maybe there's team members, is collaborative or not. So we're looking for that. And then on the transparency side, I think it gets to, when you're asking questions is, are they connecting you with people? Are they connecting you with their physicians? When they let you into the data room, does it feel stripped down or does it feel comprehensive? I know teams always talk through like what's the right level of information to put into a data room, and I think there's typical things that everyone asks for, and you might as well just start there. Otherwise, we're thinking there's an issue or right. So, just plan for, hey, this invest, and we recognize there might be some nuanced details or documents. You don't need to throw everything in there, but there's a set of materials that's uh, pretty common. So start there, and then, um, along the collaboration lines as you're going through and, wanting to see, rationale for what they did. If it's commercialization, again, hey, here's your plan. Walk me through the revenue model behind it. Walk me through the assumptions behind it, and they need to be there, and sometimes they're not. So, just a few things, but I'll let Justin chime in as well.
I think those are good examples. The one that probably comes to mind most for me, or we kind of see most often, and it can happen at any stage, but it's still an important flag even for early stages, is when teams present wildly unrealistic revenue expectations.
Mm.
And I don't mean, things that VCs want to cut 30% across the board and, kind of fine tune. We see some on occasion where, there are revenue projections that like no med tech company in history has ever put up. And it doesn't matter what category, the product is in. When you see things like that, I worry either the team really doesn't understand the product category they're going after or have a realistic view of what it's going to take to kind of build a business and therefore what inputs are required at earlier stages, right, to prepare for that. Or they're, getting ready to have a really difficult discussion on valuation and expectations, things like that. So sort of whatever is underlying the presentation of these numbers, it really does undermine, our interest in engaging at least that stage. And it doesn't mean we'll never look again and not invest, but it's just not at a stage where we're ready to engage deeply. Because as Susan said, there are lots of things you can debate and wrestle with. They could be strategy or tactics. Those are really good, healthy conversations to have, and you should have those with a lot of investors because it can inform, your ultimate judgment. But when somebody's just kind of way out there, one end of the spectrum on what they think this could do commercially or clinically, it's sort of hard. You feel just very untethered, to have the rest of the discussion.
I saw one today with a 125 million first year revenue and a 450 second year revenue, and it's like,
Yeah,
Unrealistic
I don't think that's ever been done
projection.
right?
by anybody. Even if you were giving away free gold, you'd have trouble making that right.
Keep
Not enough
things
wheelbarrows. We just can't get that many wheelbarrows together.
Exactly.
thing to end on. And we have one final question, which is submitted from our LinkedIn audience, which is how do each of you determine if you lead a round or join one that someone else is leading? So I guess do your firms lead rounds or not? And what makes it worth your time to lead? So Lisa, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, we'll do either. We're not picky as long as we like the syndicate and the terms and the company, of course. We will lead if we feel like we have something material to offer that's, or time that we're willing to commit above and beyond. But even if we, don't lead, we want to be active and engaged. So for us, it's more about just what makes sense in that particular moment.
Great. Susan, what about you guys?
Our preference is to lead or co-lead. And mainly it's driven by, really wanting an ownership stake that's meaningful to us, and that's gonna justify our time. As I mentioned, we tend to lean into our companies. Sometimes our team have stepped in and out of companies to bridge, hiring or different roles and such. And so we do spend a lot of our personal time within, working with our companies. And so that typically means leading typically means that ownership stake matches what we need to see from a return perspective.
Makes sense. Albert, how about you guys? Does Hackensack ever lead deals?
No, we follow. Again, as a strategic, we really do follow, and so we don't lead. No.
Yeah. Justin,
Yeah,
guys
we
lead.
like to lead or co-lead our investments. We're frequently joining the board, one or two, board seats, and we expect to stay committed and engaged all the way through, the life cycle of the company, whatever path it takes. And so, we want to do all the primary due diligence up front. We want to make sure we have alignment with the team and board and other investors on the plan, and then we really do try to contribute, as we go. And so, as a leader, co-lead, you have a lot more of that opportunity for influence and partnership. That's important to us.
Perfect. All right. Well, with that, want to end the public live streamed portion of this and move into our cohort Q&A. So thank you so much to everyone who joined us on LinkedIn. Thank you to whoever submitted the great question. We've got 2 more live stream webinars coming up soon. So next week is going to be the other side of the coin, which is non-dilutive dollars. So the strings attached, navigating grants and these non-dilutive funding sources. Got a stacked panel as well for that. And then the week after, we're going to be talking about what comes next. So acquisitions in our panel, Acquired Taste, what strategics really want in medtech. So be sure to join us for those as well. Follow MedTech Innovator if you're not already, and hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you to our panelists, Justin, Lisa, Albert, and Susan, for sharing your incredible insight and wisdom with everyone.